Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar, Overcoming Tech Inequality with Strategic Device Deployment. Thanks for joining us. As everyone is still getting signed in, we'll just go over a few housekeeping items. Please think of questions throughout the webinar and direct them to the Q&A section. We'll be answering these throughout and at the end of the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and we'll share that recording with you shortly after this webinar is finished. If we don't get to all of your questions, we will follow up with you afterwards. Reaching out to info@jamf.com will also get you in contact with someone at Jamf quickly. My name is Matt Pullen. I work in the product marketing team here at Jamf, focusing on education. Technology fuels progress in the modern world, but we need to be mindful of this digital divide, the inequality that separates those with access from those without. In the classroom, it's crucial to bridge this gap to empower every student to succeed. And key to this solution, purposeful deployment of technology tools. To unleash the full potential of technology in the classroom and create the best learning environment, you need to develop a comprehensive plan for device management with an eye on that broader picture. Now, we've got a lot to get through today in this session, starting with first defining what the digital divide looks like in education, before moving on to this idea of planning for a purposeful device deployment. We'll then go on to talk about how we can widen that positive impact beyond technology, but through the use of technology, which helps schools understand how their budgets can be expanded to meet the needs of every aspect of their planning. And finally, we'll look at how we can maintain that progress with budget-aware refresh strategies to make sure that your teaching and learning with technology plan can be something that can go beyond that initial investment in devices. Now at Jamf, our mission is always to help institutions to succeed with Apple. And in education, we help bridge that gap between what Apple creates and what education requires. And we do this by creating enterprise secure solutions for any kind of institution that are education simple, but also protect the privacy of your students and staff. And we've been helping organizations succeed with Apple for more than 20 years. Today, Jamf helps more than 74,000 customers that manage and secure more than 31 million Apple devices. And you can see here that Jamf supports top global universities, top US school districts, and some of those best school districts around the world. We have seen Apple adoption take off over the last few years, and we've seen education really transformed by Apple. And we are proud of the education communities we support. Jamf is now helping over 40 million students globally succeed with Apple across 40,000 schools via one-to-one and Apple shared devices. We are so grateful for this community and we are really proud to serve it. So let's start by understanding what the digital divide means. In essence, it refers to the gap between those who have access to modern information and communication technology and those who do not. In the context of education, this divide manifests in disparities in access to digital devices, the internet, and digital literacy skills. The first pillar of the digital divide in education is access to technology. Many students, particularly in underserved communities, lack the basic tools needed for remote learning. Now, this includes devices like laptops or tablets and a reliable internet connection. And we saw this throughout the COVID pandemic. But when we look at students taking devices home to continue their learning beyond the school day, this is still a complete need to make sure students can continue their learning on the same level as everybody else. A key factor contributing to the digital divide is a socioeconomic status. Families with lower incomes often struggle to afford the necessary technology, putting their children at a disadvantage in the modern educational landscape. This creates a cycle of inequality, limiting those opportunities for those who need them most. And another dimension of the digital divide is the discrepancy between urban and rural areas. While urban centres may have better infrastructure and access to high-speed internet, many rural communities face challenges in establishing reliable connectivity, further widening the education gap. So as schools are starting to plan for different approaches and transformational use of technology, what does that mean for those students that when they get home don't have the same connectivity to be able to further their studies? So let's explore that impact on the digital divide in education. As we said, students without access to technology are at a disadvantage when it comes to participating in online classes, accessing educational resources, and developing essential digital skills. This hampers their academic progress and limits their future opportunities. Many students want to learn beyond the classroom. As a result of COVID, they've seen and benefited from the opportunities where teachers have started to think differently about how they present information. But if students can't access that learning when they get beyond the school day, what are they going to do when they fall behind their peers that do have access to those things? And access alone is not enough. Digital literacy, or the ability to use digital tools effectively, is crucial. Students must not only have access to technology, but also be equipped with the skills to navigate the digital landscape, critically assess information, and communicate effectively online. The COVID-19 pandemic has underscored and accelerated the digital divide in education. With the shift to remote learning, students without adequate technology and internet access faced even greater challenges, widening this gap and exacerbating existing inequalities. Incorporating technology into pedagogy. If we train our teachers on integrating technology seamlessly into their teaching methods, this would involve using digital tools to enhance lesson plans, engage students, and create interactive learning experiences. Emphasizing the importance of diverse learning resources available on the internet can help teachers understand how to incorporate the resources into their curriculum. And if educators start to develop adaptive teaching strategies to cater to the students and their varying levels of technology access, this can support students in many unique ways, including providing alternative methods for students who may not have access to devices or the internet at home. And if we encourage teachers to create a supportive and inclusive learning environment, we can get them to understand the diverse technological backgrounds of their students. In order for this to be successful, we need to consider how we support ongoing professional development opportunities for educators to stay updated on the latest educational technology trends and tools, but also understand which ones are going to be most beneficial to their learners in the classroom. This can be done through forums for collaboration and knowledge sharing amongst educators, fostering communities of practice where successful strategies for addressing the digital divide can be shared. And all of this is underpinned by the need to understand student needs. Staff need to start to consider how they can assess the technology needs of their students, potentially through conducting surveys or engaging in dialogue with students and their families to understand their access to devices, internet connectivity, and digital literacy levels. As students start to develop strategies for differentiated instruction, it can help accommodate the varied technology resources available to students. Cultivating this positive attitude towards technology is really important. As educators start to utilize technology more, we see a bit of a digital divide between those in education that understand the power and those that might be scared of it. Providing them with opportunities to develop their own skills so that it becomes more commonplace in the classroom can also help bridge this digital divide between the teaching of digital skills, where teachers may feel a little bit more fearful of adopting this approach. Success stories of where technology has effectively bridged those education gaps and improved student outcomes are really important things to share amongst our education community. So let's move on to this idea of planning for a purposeful deployment with the devices. Let's start by thinking about what purposeful deployment means. Let's consider that you know that you have to start to integrate digital tools into your classroom experience. You can do this simply by providing a device which has access to the internet so students can consume the knowledge based on an alternative approach to how we used to do this through just having books. But purposeful deployment goes a lot wider than that. And when you start to consider the ability to utilize digital technology to meet more goals of a school development plan, then that purpose becomes a lot broader and is something which can be easily maintained across various different stakeholders. This is a direct quote from one of our Jamf school partners. We know that the power of Jamf is that we can support schools in their purposeful deployments, because we know that schools that deploy technology with a purpose are focused on the learning and teaching outcomes broader than simply just providing access to the internet. And here's another quote. Because it's about personalization in this case for every child and their device. This goes way beyond just providing access to content. This is about ensuring that every student can succeed because they're providing them with a tool that enables them to navigate some of the issues that they might face based on traditional learning methods. Broader than simply just providing accessibility tools to those with specific educational needs, this is about leveling the playing field for all students so that whatever their individual need is, it can be met because the device can be personalized to meet that need. Consider a student who may have difficulties in being able to present their information in written form. That could be someone with a physical disability, but could equally be somebody who just struggles to get their ideas out of their head and onto paper through writing. Being able to speak that onto a device changes how they can access learning and starts to think about how the digital divide can be reduced because students now have access to a tool that enables their outcomes of their learning to be more successful. And as we look at what successful deployments look like, they always start with a clear and shared vision or purpose. So when we think about this from a shared purpose, we think about which individuals are part of this from a stakeholder point of view. How do we align everybody's individual purpose and ideal of what technology can do as part of an overall solution? These are just 8 stakeholders that you might have within your institution. Each one will see technology from a slightly different point of view. Let's take a look at what this might look like and who cares about different elements. Let's start with the management of the IT. This is the more traditional approach to thinking about how devices have been purchased and then get managed within the institution. Finance, curriculum, IT, and the educator will all care to certain extents about the management of the devices. Maybe it's to do with the budget demands and making sure that it's efficient, the IT admin's role in making sure that these things are set up. But both the curriculum lead and the educator also care about the management because it means that they can just do the things that they've planned for in the classroom. Different people within this see this from a different point of view. And we talk about this a lot at Jamf, between that role between the IT admin managing the devices and the educator in the classroom using those managed devices. It's critical to understand the different needs of the people within this group to make sure everybody gets the best tools to get the best usage out of the devices. And then the security of those IT devices. This is critical in education. No more so than any other industry, but in education we start to think about those minors that have their data that needs to be protected. Again, the IT admin predominantly takes responsibility for the security of those devices, but it matters a lot to the curriculum, to the educator, and the parents' carers to make sure those students are safe whilst they're working online. One of the key responsibilities of a school is to make sure that children are going through that safe and secure access to technology, and that they're educated on these things so that it can be utilized safely beyond the school day. And then the teaching and learning. Fundamentally, the reason why technology will be put into a school environment in the hands of students is that it has an impact on teaching and learning. Leadership will have to justify the investment that's been put into these things and understand how they need to support the curriculum, the educators, and the students as well as the parents and carers, to understand how an alternative approach is benefiting their learners. If you consider that most parents might not fully understand what technology in schools looks like based on their own experience, they may see the use of technology through a more personal or game-based approach because of devices being used outside of school time. It's important to understand that technology in the classroom has a real impact on teaching and learning. And how do we ensure that we go beyond simply just changing an approach of utilizing books and using the internet to replace that, but more so thinking about how students can start to approach their learning in a different way and unlock that learning potential that we've spoke about in previous webinars, where students actually use the technology to unlock new approaches to how they represent their information and learn new skills that are going to be relevant to the workplace as they progress in their careers. We mentioned briefly already the budget demands. Now, this is a big thing. We know that technology can have a huge cost implication, but that budget demand goes way beyond simply purchasing the device. If you think about your budget as being segmented into what you're purchasing, digital technology might take up a huge piece of that. If you consider the impact of that digital technology on a broader array of things within your plan, though, you start to see that the investment in the devices has a wider impact on outcomes. Consider how technology might support literacy, numeracy, parental engagement, social and emotional learning needs of students. There are so many things that technology can support if we look at it beyond simply just consumption of information. This can help leadership, finance, and the educator understand why technology in the classroom has a wide and ever-reaching impact on more than simply just access to information. And we mentioned safety in terms of security earlier, but user safety is also really important. When students are utilizing these devices in new and transformative ways, students need to be safe whilst they're online. This often comes down to the safeguarding lead or equivalent within your school to make sure that students are not exposed to information they shouldn't have access to. It's really important here that we consider the balance between students' privacy as well as their safety whilst online. And stopping them from accessing content that they shouldn't access is really important. Parents and carers care that their children are not going to be accessing things that is going to cause them any harm. But we also want to educate these students about the benefits of using technology, the wealth of information that's out there, but what comes with the major amount of technology information is that sometimes that can be harmful. So we need to always make sure that we have something in place that protects those students, and different stakeholders will have different views on how to do this. And understanding different people's views is important when making that decision about how best to do this in your institution. So let's take a look at how we can think about that idea of widening the positive impact that goes beyond simply just purchasing the technology. These are just some models of what purposeful deployment could look like. We start to think about the decision of choosing Apple technology as being something which is driven by what Apple provides you in your classroom environment. We talk a lot about creativity, communication, the ability to be mobile in your learning and not simply stuck within one place, the accessibility tools that brings. And once you've decided to go with Apple, we think that Jamf is the best solution to make sure that all of those devices are managed. Both your iPads, your MacBooks, your Mac computers, as well as your Apple TVs, because they're all part of this transformative learning environment. And we know that our classroom tools that we have in terms of Jamf Teacher and Jamf Student support the teacher in making sure that these things are set up exactly for the purpose of the learning and teaching, taking that purposeful deployment all the way through to the classroom activity, meaning that that well-managed box now becomes a well-managed box that gets used effectively in the classroom. But then you can start to build even further onto this. Through applications like Shobi or Caligo, Explain Everything, or using things like Trilby TV or Carousel to make sure that the devices that you have around the school connected to Apple TVs are displaying relevant content that can support your students beyond the classroom sessions. Now, this might look different based between primary, secondary, or if you're part of a wider district. But those things can simply be interchanged based on your needs. If you have a specific literacy need, for example, Caligo is going to lend itself really well to supporting your students. That might not be appropriate for older students. So you might utilize something like GoodNotes because it's a great way for students to develop their awareness and create their own study tools. You change those things in, but they ultimately all still get managed through Jamf and managed in the classroom through the teacher tools as well. And this goes the same for higher education. We can consider in higher education, you may have two different areas. There's the key infrastructure that you need to have set up to make sure that the commercial aspects of the business are functioning. But then there's still the learning aspect. When we take this into the classroom in higher education, how do those tools differ based on the subject that students are teaching, their level of understanding, based on their digital literacy? And remember, the students that are entering higher education now are students that have had a K-12 education where they will have had some time utilizing digital technology to support them in their education. It's critical to take this on board as we try to meet those learning needs. And all of this is then underpinned by ongoing professional learning. This is only going to stick in the classroom if educators feel comfortable using these tools and understand how best to use these. So let's look at how this looks with Jamf as a solution as part of the journey. We know that you choose Apple devices because of the impact they can have in the classroom. And we support that through Apple School Manager and Jamf as the tool to make sure they're managed effectively. Once they're managed effectively, they need to be used effectively. And that's where the additional tools of Jamf Teacher, Jamf Student, Apple Classroom really support that classroom approach to how to best support students in their learning. We then extend that further then with those additional apps that really support what you want to achieve in the classroom. Is that through personalized learning, giving students the ability to do things in a way that works for them? Is it by supporting them through different feedback opportunities? But equally, making sure that IT admins have the tools that connect to their MDM to make sure things are set up effectively and kept up to date. If students move from one class to another mid-term, how do we transfer that information so the classroom experience on devices is still met? And then finally, we think about the security aspect and how do we make sure that those students are safe in that environment, that they understand how to make the best of the devices, and teachers feel confident to allow students to work beyond the classroom, knowing that they're going to be safe. And safety comes beyond simply content filtering, thinking about how Jamf Safe Internet supports the phishing, malware, and spam attacks that we know are increasing within education. That students that might accidentally tap on a link that might expose the network to a threat is going to be protected by something behind the scenes. So we know that each individual or group will have a different focus on the role of technology. But when we bring them all together and we see the overlaps, we have that purposeful deployment that meets all of the needs, which means there's a more efficient use of the technology impacting on many different areas, from budget, workload, student outcomes, and better communication. When we think about in terms of purpose for providing management and security approaches, we think about how we can equally engage students and educators and parents in this whole approach. We manage those devices through zero-touch deployment, making sure that the education workflows are in place and all of those app integrations are supported at that top end. We secure those devices, making sure that students are safe through content filtering, but equally our network is safe through that threat prevention and remediation. And then finally, we ensure that there is engagement with the tools, making sure that teachers use these effectively in the classroom, that students want to use the tools but focus on learning through enhanced professional development opportunities for that outcome of redefining the learning environment for your students. So let's just finish up then, thinking about how we make this something which lasts beyond the initial investment of the devices. In most cases, we'll see this idea that devices have been purchased, there'll be a real emphasis on how the devices are used for the students, and then in 3 years' time, we have to consider the budget. So does that change how we transform teaching and learning when we're going through these cycles? Here are just a few benefits to considering why Apple and Jamf, as part of that life cycle management of devices, can support the ongoing progress of any digital teaching and learning initiative. Thinking about restarting a technology initiative may be more cost effective than you think. Apple technology is durable, designed to last with high quality, powerful hardware. It works seamlessly with software and services. And Apple products have a higher trade-in value when it's time to upgrade. And with Apple Financial Services, it's easy to make sure that those Apple products are used in education in a way that's simple and cost-effective. This is hardware that is long-lasting and durable, and less breakage means less downtime, fewer reserve devices needed, and more time to empower every kind of educator and student to learn, create, and define their own success. Now, iPad is a powerful device that makes everything more responsive, from that web browsing to using multiple apps at once. We know that this is really supportive in the classroom because it means that the devices are going to be used specifically for what they're needed with less downtime whilst you're waiting for things to load. In many classrooms, that's the point that teachers fear because it's the point where students might go off track. Making sure students stay engaged with the learning at all time and having the technology as a tool rather than a main focus is critical to make sure that every educator wants to use these devices. The other thing to consider is the fact that these devices are kept up to date. We know that it's really important for all schools to think about how that security of the device helps make sure the security of their networks are not effective. Sometimes updating the software is part of that security process. And we know that with Apple devices, we get regular security updates managed through Jamf to make sure those devices stay at the best security level that they can be, making sure student privacy is still protected at all times. And then finally, let's think about how IT and end user support is impacted. Apple and Jamf support educators and leaders with a range of professional learning experiences. Educators can access free resources in the Apple Learning Center and get ideas and support through their Apple Teacher Recognition. They can go even further with Apple Professional Learning to help them understand how this gets used effectively within the classroom. And Jamf also offers educators and IT admins Jamf Educator as a tool to help them understand how Jamf can be used powerful in the classroom through a simulated environment. Please do check out these resources if you haven't done already. It's an important part of making sure that devices are used effectively over time and not just based on a budget life cycle. So let's just wrap things up then, going back to our initial agenda. We've defined what the digital divide looks like in education and highlighted some of those areas that can have an impact on students going forward. We've discussed what planning a purposeful device deployment looks like and the importance of making sure that all stakeholders are part of those decisions. We've then looked at how we can make sure that if we widen the positive impacts beyond the initial use of technology, it can help you broaden both the budget spend, but equally focus on the impact that technology has had beyond simply just access to information. And finally, we've looked at the need to maintain that progress and make sure that budget demands are met by thinking long-term about how this is integrated into your school so that things don't change every 3 years and impact on students' learning as a result. Consistency across teaching and learning is key to make sure that teachers, educators, IT admins are on board with a teaching and learning with technology strategy. We'd like to point out some resources that are going to be very useful for you as you consider this. We've talked about how Jamf School can be utilised as part of a teaching and learning plan. Please do download this classroom guide for iPad, highlighting how these different purposeful deployments can help make sure your vision comes to reality. And of course, we're nothing without our customers, and we know that through the power of our Jamf Nation community. We talked about the importance to share impact of what you're doing so others can learn from it. And with over 100,000 Apple IT focused individuals, they learn brilliantly from each other. And when we talk about extending the opportunities with Jamf, our Jamf Marketplace is full of education tools that can help take your deployment even further, both supporting the IT admin and the classroom practitioner to get the best out of those devices. And that's it for this session. I hope you found this insightful and have